Right now, somewhere in your house, there's a switch. You'll flip it tonight without even thinking about it. Darkness will last exactly as long as you want it to, which for most of us is basically never. That single fact makes you an alien compared to almost every human who ever lived. For roughly 300,000 years, Homo sapiens spent close to half of every day, in near total darkness. Not dim, not mood lighting. Actual darkness, the kind where you can't find your own feet. And here's the strange part. We've almost completely forgotten what our species did with all that time. Not because it's a mystery, but because the answer got buried under 100 years of electric light. Once we dug it back up, it turned out our ancestors weren't just waiting for morning. They were doing something that shaped how we sleep, how we tell stories, and possibly even how we became the kind of animal that has religion, gossip, and bedtime stories at all. Let's go back to before any of that was possible, to a time when nightfall meant one thing: stay still or die. Before fire, humans followed the same rule book as every other daytime primate. Sun goes down, you find somewhere safe, and you don't move until it's light again. This wasn't caution, it was survival math. Human night vision is mediocre at best. We're basically blind next to a leopard, a hyena, or a wolf. Every predator that mattered could see us long before we could see them. Moving around after dark wasn't brave. It was just a slower way of volunteering to be dinner. Then, somewhere around 1,000,000 years ago, the oldest confirmed hearths found in South Africa's Wonderwork cave put a hard date on it. Something changed the equation completely. Fire didn't just produce heat, it produced a boundary. Researchers who've studied modern hunter-gatherer camps describe roughly a 30-foot radius around a fire where predators simply won't cross. Step outside that ring at night, and the odds tilt sharply against you. Anthropologists have documented exactly this happening in groups still living semi-traditionally today. But the bigger gift fire gave us wasn't safety. It was time. Without fire, a day ends at sunset, somewhere between 8 and 12 hours, depending on the season. Fire quietly bolted on another 2 to 4 hours of usable time every single day for hundreds of thousands of generations. What did our ancestors do with that stolen time? This is where it gets interesting. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiesner published a study that's become one of the more cited pieces of research on this topic. She spent years recording actual conversations among the Jew/Huansi Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert, one of the last groups whose lifestyle still resembles how humans lived for most of our history. What she found was a near-total personality split between day and night. Daytime conversation, by her recordings, was almost entirely logistics. Roughly 80% of it was who's hunting where, which plants are ready, who owes who what. Practical, transactional. The stuff of running a household. At night, around the fire, that flipped. About 81% of nighttime talk was story. Myths, gossip about people 3 valleys over, jokes, tales dressed up with a little exaggeration. Wiesner's argument, and it's a compelling one, is that this nightly ritual is where human culture actually got its start. Not in the tool-making, in the talking. Think about what a fire circle actually is. It's the first stage, the first classroom, arguably the first place of worship. It's the one setting in early human life built entirely around imagination instead of survival. The place where what happened today turned into what if and once long ago. That's one half of what darkness gave us. The other half is even stranger because it's hiding inside your own body right now. Here's a claim that sounds made up but isn't. Until roughly 200 years ago, almost nobody on Earth slept the way you do. Historian Roger E. Kirch spent 16 years combing through old documents, court records, medical texts, private letters, prayer manuals, even lines buried in Homer, and kept running into the same 2 phrases over and over across centuries and countries: first sleep and second sleep. The pattern he found was remarkably consistent. People went to bed not long after dark, slept about 4 hours, then woke up. Not from a nightmare, not from noise. Just naturally. They'd stay awake for an hour or 2 in the middle of the night. Then they'd drift into a second 4-hour block until dawn. This wasn't insomnia. Nobody wrote about it like it was a problem. It was just Tuesday. What's almost funnier is what people actually did during that gap. A French physician in the 1500s recommended couples use that window to conceive children, on the theory they'd have better luck at it. Others used it to visit neighbors, mull over a dream while it was still fresh, or simply lie there in the dark, thinking. One old medical guide specifically called that stretch the best time for quiet reflection, because the house was silent, and the mind, apparently, was calm in a way it isn't during the day. For a long time, historians actually mistranslated these references because the idea of humans sleeping in two separate blocks seemed so far from modern experience that translators assumed it must mean something else. The assumption was so strong, it altered how ancient texts got read. Then, in the early 1990s, science caught up to the history books. Psychiatrist Thomas Ware ran an experiment at the National Institute of Mental Health where volunteers spent a month with essentially zero artificial light, 14 hours of darkness a night, matching what a pre-fire, pre-candle human evening would have looked like. Within a couple of weeks, every participant, without being told to, fell into the exact same rhythm Ekirch had found buried in centuries of paperwork. 4 hours of sleep, a stretch of calm wakefulness, then 4 more hours of sleep. Nobody coached them into it. Their bodies just remembered. And when Ware checked their hormones during that middle-of-the-night waking period, he found something that wasn't just being awake. Prolactin, a hormone also elevated during meditation, spiked. Participants described the state as peaceful, almost meditative, not restless, not anxious. This wasn't a gap between two sleeps. It looks like it was its own distinct mental state, one most of us alive today have simply never experienced. So what erased 300,000 years of programming in a couple of centuries? The obvious answer: light, arriving faster and faster. Street lamps started showing up in cities in the 1600s. Paris, under Louis XIV, largely as an anti-crime measure. London followed. Cheap candles became common. Gas lighting spread through cities in the 1800s. Then, in 1879, Edison's light bulb went commercial, and within a single generation, the night that had shaped humans for nearly all of our existence simply stopped existing in any meaningful way. Here's a small detail that tells you how seriously pre-industrial societies took nighttime darkness. The English word curfew comes from the Old French couvre-feu, literally cover the fire. Towns would ring a bell at a set hour, signaling everyone to smother their household fires. That wasn't about crime prevention, it was the belief that night was supposed to be dark, full stop. In plenty of medieval European towns, being outside after dark without a lantern was flatly illegal. Night belonged to danger, to superstition, to things you didn't go looking for. Then we lit it up completely. And we called that progress without asking what the trade was. Today, the average person gets 7 to 8 hours of artificial light exposure after sunset. Screens are the worst offenders. Blue light specifically suppresses melatonin, the hormone your body uses to signal, it's night, wind down. Your brain can't tell a phone screen from the sun. Light hits your retina at 11 p.m., and as far as your biology is concerned, it might as well be noon. Melatonin gets delayed. Sleep gets fragmented. A rhythm that took millions of years to evolve gets quietly overridden by a rectangle in your hand. And the fix, when researchers have tested it, is almost embarrassingly fast. People who spend just a week camping with zero artificial light see their melatonin timing shift by close to 2 hours. Their bodies start releasing it at actual sunset instead of hours later. A single week undoes what decades of light bulbs built up, which raises an uncomfortable question. We didn't just shift our bedtime. We erased an entire state of consciousness, that calm, prolactin-soaked, meditative gap between first and second sleep, and replaced it with something we now diagnose and medicate: insomnia. So maybe it's worth asking, if you wake up at 2 a.m. and just lie there in the dark, is that a malfunction? Or is it the oldest software your body has quietly trying to boot up again? For nearly all of human history, darkness wasn't empty time. It was story time, thinking time, a second private sleep bracketing a stretch of quiet reflection. With a sky so unpolluted by light that the Milky Way wasn't a bucket list destination, it was just what was up there every single night. We traded all of that for a light switch. Most of us never even noticed it was gone.